The lifeblood of your program used to be recruiting. That was it. That's how you build a team. That's how everything happened. Now there's several different ways to construct your roster. So what do you need to do to be important? How do you succeed in college football today? We'll discuss that today.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, and thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So do us a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, if you have subscribed, tell a friend about it. Also, hit the bell for notifications whenever we release a new video, and of course, upvote the video itself. It'd be greatly appreciated. If we hit 1,000 subscribers, which I think we're 91% of the way there to our goal, before football season, we will be doing post-game live this year. It'll be a live show that'll happen after the Ole Miss game. We'll talk about it. We'll have guests on. We'll do all kinds of stuff. Should be a lot of fun. So that'll be post-game live. So take care of that. All right. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about, honestly, where we are with like Jaxson Dart. And we saw the spring game. We saw exactly how that competition played out. We saw everything. I do want to apologize for my dog. He's going crazy. I'm recording this a little bit early today because we are doing a lot of construction around our house. So I'm trying to get this in between the construction men coming in and out of our house. And I have a dog, so it's one of those things. But let's talk about Jaxson Dart and his role in the offense. Now, he obviously has the tools to be very successful in the Ole Miss offense. Obviously, there's without a doubt he has those tools. And it just didn't come together in the spring. Now, if you take anything schematically away from spring practice, you're an idiot and not worth listening to. It's just not built that way. That's not the way they do it. It wasn't the way it was built back in 2005 before these things were on TV. These things were exhibitions that everybody get in, but whatever you didn't want people to see, didn't make it into your spring game. Last year, we had a 3-2-6 defense that nobody saw until the Louisville game. Everybody was surprised. Everybody bragged about keeping it under wraps and not letting the news out. So they ran 4-man defensive lines during their spring game in 2021. And they didn't run it a single time in the fall. It was a completely different defense. And the point is, schematically, it's a different thing. So don't judge Jaxson Dart schematically on spring practice because there's stuff that we just didn't see. And honestly, other than building up the confidence, Lane Kiffin leaving Jaxson Dart in for the whole spring game was to build himself up. Through a couple of touchdown passes, he developed a rapport with Michael Trigg. Now, if you look at this right here, 24/7 has rated him as a top 5 person for Heisman Trophy odds. That'd be 25-1, I guess that would be. And decent odds, but it's under the assumption that he's going to put up a lot of yards in this offense. That's absolutely the case. But also the fact that the talent is so much out there. Now, we do have a problem in our society, and I will fully admit that this is a problem, that swagger has taken more of a role than substance. So sometimes players get all this hype, and there's no substance behind him. So there is some stuff that Jaxson Dart needs to work on. It isn't a finished product. Everybody's going to compare him to Matt Corral, but he's not going to be Matt Corral 2021. He's going to be Matt Corral 2019. And it's important that he is developed, both by the coaching staff and himself being able to take development. If so, this offense is going to look really good because I've told y'all, he didn't have the best spring game, but when things went right and he had the reads right and he did what he was supposed to do, that offense looked very smooth. And you have to remember, this offense is going to be based off the running back, the quarterback, the tight end, and the slot receiver. That's 90% of your offense right there. The star tight end was on Jaxson Dart's team. The running back was on Luke Altmaier's team. And the slot receiver, nobody really knows who that is at this moment. So whenever I say you can't watch schematically for things in a spring game, that's another example why, and another way that they set it up so it would look a little bit different. And this is just a pretty cool thing. But Jaxson Dart is 5th in Heisman odds according to 24/7 Sports. I mean, he's going to go far. He's a talented kid. He really is. And like I said, Ole Miss is best with him hitting his ceiling. So we need to root for him to develop quickly. Ole Miss is good with Luke Altmaier hitting his ceiling, but Luke Altmaier hitting his floor, Ole Miss is also pretty good. Ole Miss is bad with Jaxson Dart starting and not hitting any ceiling and hitting his floor. He's got a wide range that he can hit at the moment. We'll see. Lane Kiffin is known to be the quarterback whisperer. Jonathan Crompton at Tennessee, and that's who I'm going to go back with, struggled under Phil Fulmer for 2 or 3 years. He threw for nearly 3,000 yards under Lane Kiffin. Montario Hardesty rushed for 1,800 yards. He knows how to work with quarterbacks and let him do it. And I understand that people want to have their say and they think they know better, but they don't. Let this guy, he has the track record of doing this. Let this guy work. And he will do what needs to be done. And if Jaxson Dart doesn't get it done, he's also known as a fairly ruthless person who has no problem sitting Jaxson Dart down for Luke Altmaier. Remember, I took this quarterback competition seriously since January. Nobody else did. Everybody else just assumed it was a formality. But I'm the one that took this seriously from the beginning. And because of that, I have a nice balanced view now. Because people that anointed Jaxson Dart in January, just anointing him, is just no big deal. Luke Altmaier's terrible. Just because he struggled against a very, very good Baylor defense. That's the best defense we played last year, by the way. And he struggled a little bit against them. The same people that anointed Jaxson Dart to be the quarterback are now the same people that is just completely poo-pooing him as a position player. It's crazy the swings that they have. It's almost like they will defend their take till their death. And if it doesn't pan out for them, they will completely turn on. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's stupid. It really is. But, I mean, what can you do, honestly? What can you do? Today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you will need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait for the person behind the counter to order parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So, save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. So go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. So go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car and truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. For your next listening, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Audacity app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Anyway, in the first segment of the show, we talked about how Jaxson Dart is getting a little bit of hype. We talked about how what we saw in spring doesn't necessarily represent what he is. It's going to be up to him to be developed. It's going to be up to coaching staff to develop him. But these guys have a track record of developing quarterbacks. Now, we're going to talk about our recruiting. We're going to get into the recruiting aspect of our program now and with John Garcia in the next segment. And I want to explain something that I've talked about several times, but haven't really hit on this one particular thing. And I do think some people need to understand this. And it's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just a different way to do it. But there's essentially 3 ways to build your roster right now in college football. There are the traditional recruiters, that's just recruiting high school kids. You're going to get as many as you can get. You can get 5 stars, get them. So that'd be the Oklahomas, the Georgias, the Alabamas, those guys. And you have the NIL monsters that are going to bid and overpay for players and build their roster just like the Yankees. They're the Texas A&M, the Texas, the USC, even the Ohio State. Even though they're kind of dabbling on the NIL, they have a chance to be a real monster, by the way. NIL and traditional recruiter. They double monster there. The third way is the transfer portal. And this is where Ole Miss is making its bones. The transfer portal is set up a little bit differently than the other two, to where you're basically recruiting off of current college players' rosters. So you have a situation where players that were really good group of 5 players have a chance to move up, almost like a minor league baseball situation. That's the way you can look at this. Somebody goes to an FCS school and has done fairly well. They can bump up to AA into the group of 5, and you're going to see that. And you're going to see the group of 5 bump into the Power 5. You're going to see the elite of the elite, that these traditional recruiters and then these NIL monsters, players coming down a little bit. So the transfer portal offers a respite a little bit for some school like Ole Miss to get and accumulate elite talent. Now, Ole Miss, going into the Sugar Bowl last year, had 17 players, 4 or 5 star or better, coming out of high school. Right now, they're sitting at about 34. They've completely reshaped the talent profile of this roster. Now, you don't know about it. Nobody talks about it because it wasn't done in high school recruiting. There wasn't any way for them to make money off of it, because that's the dirty little secret here. When it comes to high school recruiting and things like that, Rivals 24/7 on 3, they've figured out an excellent way to monetize that, and that is through signing days. Whenever you can build to a certain point, you can make a lot of money on that. You can make a lot of money on coaches searches, but everything was formulaic there. I worked at Rivals for 10 years. I've seen all of this. I've seen people at team sites absolutely giddy over a coaching search. Not that they had any care whatsoever about the coach, just the fact that a coaching search is going to lead to an uptick in subscribers. And that's going to put more money in their pocket. Around signing day, you're going to have a bunch of guys. Doesn't matter what they do. They're going to say you're in on a couple of guys just so they can guarantee those missed, because angst on signing day will lead to an uptick in subscriptions. That's the way this works. So the transfer portal, being a year-round thing with no beginning or end, initials going away, making sure that it's going to be a year-round thing. That's the reason you're going to see them call for things like transfer windows, something they can promote, something they can treat like high school recruiting. That is the reason why you see the media talking about the transfer portal and all that happening. They're talking about coaches being overworked and all that. Well, they've done away with the number of coaches that can recruit. Now you can hire 10 guys just for the transfer portal if you want. College football has changed so much in the last 3 years. Just so much in the last 3 years. And it's absolutely amazing. But it's even going to change a little bit more. And there's going to be a time that you don't really recognize what's going on with college sports. And you need to understand that. You need to find things that they can't take away within the university. Don't worry about the names on the back. Worry about the uniforms. Take an NCAA 14 approach to college sports. It's kind of generic. It's kind of fun. It's just the way it's going to be moving forward. Because remember, we do this transfer portal thing not because we want to, because we have to. Our coach would not do anything that would be more difficult. If there was an easier way to get elite talent, he would do it. This is the path we have to take. Understand, we're not the most wealthy school in the world. We don't have the highest enrollment. Kind of is what it is. But I do think people needed to hear that the transfer portal is our primary, why it is our primary, and why people tend to look down on it. And I hope I was able to, help you guys out. I don't know. It is what it is. Anyway, coming up here in the next segment, we're going to have John Garcia. We're going to talk a little Marcel Reed, a little Jaden Rashada, a little Ole Miss recruiting in general. Maybe the transfer portal is available. I don't know. We're going to have about 10 minutes with him in a few minutes. But right now, our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. Hey, they've got Ole Miss at over/under at 7.5 wins. They're 21.5 favorite over Troy in the first inning. The odds are starting to come out Ole Miss related. So BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including iTunes. Don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes. You can say whatever you want to say. You can talk about how Steve doesn't know what he's talking about, but just please give us a 5-star review. I'm here with John Garcia. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting. It's been a little bit of a break, but John doesn't know this. A plumber flooded my house. There's been a lot of construction in the palatial Central Florida studios here. And they're including right now, actually. So tomorrow it should be done, finally, but it is what it is. But some interesting thing. Jaden Rashada added 3 schools to his list. Now, is this an NIL hunt, per se? What exactly is going on here?
Look, I think the kid's, he's been a little bit frustrated. His timeline has moved up and down relative to the rest of the top quarterbacks in the country. So I don't think it's necessarily just an NIL hunt. I think, look, if you're a high-profile quarterback, NIL is going to be good, almost wherever you go. So in that regard, I think Jaden's going to be just fine. But look, new schools are trying to play into this thing. Texas A&M, LSU in particular, hadn't been, named among his top schools for quite some time. But they're trying to get late visits before his June 18th commitment date. So I do think that he will reciprocate and take those trips. And then we know the other players that have long been in there, right? Ole Miss, Oregon, and Miami in particular. No disrespect to Cal, but I think that was, a bit of a interesting, school to keep on that top group as far as we can tell. And then Florida's trying to get involved here too at the last minute. So I do think that, he wants to play, big boy football. Certainly the SEC appeals to him. It's got more schools in it than the Pac-12, and he's a Cali kid. So I do think that matters as well. But he just wants to cover his bases. He's been to Ole Miss a few times. He's been to LSU a couple of times, Miami a couple of times, Oregon a couple of times, Florida, A&M, and not so much. So I do think he wants to cover those bases, and A&M's, I don't want to say desperate for a quarterback, but they absolutely have to hit on this quarterback in the class of 2023, and they're pushing hard for guys like Rashada, Dante Moore, and others as they try to fill the gap left by Eli Holstein when he decommitted, actually just committed to Alabama. So I do think Rashada and these guys they're aware of the quarterback dominoes nationally, and they're keeping an eye on it, how it goes, and I think he's just trying to keep as many options open as possible ahead of that June 18th commitment date.
Yeah, an interesting situation is developing. The top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in this class, while they're waiting, the timeline is out there. Nobody's being willing to be left holding the bag, so to speak. Like Ole Miss took Marcel Reed. Eli Holstein, as you just mentioned, went to Alabama. Arkansas committed a guy, and it's my opinion that any SEC school, even Vanderbilt, should be able to sign a 4-star quarterback. But that leads me to this. Marcel Reed had a pretty good showing at his Elite 11. He didn't get the auto invite, but one might come down the line. They have a tendency every now and then to to extend an invite later. What's your impression of him in that Elite 11 event and down the road?
Yeah, I was there, and Marcel was great. I mean, really from the outset. First of all, he kind of strikes you with his build, right? He's built almost like a shooting guard, right? 6'2", 6'3", slender, long arms. So you're like, okay, how quick is this release going to be with a kid who's a little bit longer? Lightning quick. No issue with the release time in terms of his mechanics. And he's got some flexibility there going back to his baseball days where he can drop his arm angle and deliver the football from a couple different launch points. So early on, you're stricken by his physical build. And then as the camp wore on, you really like the consistency that he showed. You know he's a good athlete. You know, he ran for like 12 touchdowns last year. So certainly in those situations where those counselors wanted to push him outside the pocket, wanted to push him outside the box, Marcel was right there in the footwork, right there in the execution from the outside. But inside the pocket, he was among the most consistent there. And this was a loaded group. I think 20-something states were represented at this Elite 11 in Nashville. But a lot of the local guys really represented in terms of doing well. As you mentioned, Malachi Singleton, who's committed to Arkansas, was great. Reed was great. Brock Glenn, another Tennessean, was really, really good. They were the ones that were right in the thick of it from where we sat in terms of filming every throw and evaluating us. So I thought it was a great showing for Marcel Reed. He outthrew Nico Iamaleava, who was widely considered the best quarterback in attendance. He ran out of gas a little bit in terms of as the day wore on because it was a hot day, 4-hour workout. But Marcel never ran out of gas. Very consistent, short to intermediate. The deep ball was pretty good early on in the event, and he was quite accurate in the pro day station as well. So I left with a much higher opinion of Marcel Reed than I went into the camp with. And you pair that with his high school tape and you say, hey, look, you know, Ole Miss is still recruiting Jaden and maybe they want another quarterback at the end of this cycle. But if it's just Marcel Reed, that should be plenty for Rebel fans to grasp, especially considering that the quarterback room right now in Oxford's pretty young, right? Guys with a lot of eligibility with Jaxson Dart and Luke Altmaier ahead of him. So I think it's a good situation for all parties involved. And he's gung-ho about the Rebels, which I think is the most important thing when you lock in a quarterback short term.
Yeah, whenever you look at his ceiling, like if Marcel Reed comes in and completely develops, like hits his absolute max, do you see a little bit of RG3 there?
I could see that. He's certainly built similarly. I do think just like RG3 when he got to Baylor, he's got to add some weight and some physicality to his game, which again, I think will come once the singular focus is football and he hits an SEC weight room, strength and nutrition program. All that stuff will take care of itself. So I do think he's going to need some time to physically develop. Now, as a runner, it's hard to put him in that RG3 box. I mean, that's one of the twitchiest runners we've ever seen. But in terms of the threat of running, I do think that he could present something similar to a defense, like you said, if he maximizes his ability and hits his ceiling as a quarterback. And another thing you like about him, he'll be a 4-year starter at a big-time program at Montgomery Bell Academy. So I think all of those things line up really well in terms of his floor and his ceiling, which is really important at every position, but of course, especially at quarterback. But he's got the physical traits to be a problem in a modern SEC offense, especially, you know, one under Lane Kiffin down the line. But I do think the timeline needs to be patient, you know, from the Ole Miss fan base here. He's got some physical development to make, but I do know, connecting with some folks in Oxford, that they feel really good about taking that commitment when they did. Remember, he visited when Rashada was on campus, and they took him like 2 days later. So I do think that was important in how you look at the Ole Miss influence and perspective with this Marcel Reed commitment.
All right. Let's break out the crystal ball for a second. We know we're about to hit camp season. Things are going to start getting wild and everything. Who do you think is the next commitment that might look Ole Miss's way?
It's a great question. You know, I think Bryson Sanders is maybe the most important of those who might be making a decision in the next month or so. He's the offensive lineman, another kid from Tennessee, by the way. He's expected to commit, I believe, June 24th. So we're less than a month away, or right about a month away June 23rd, actually, a month away from that decision. And Ole Miss got the first official visit in with him. He said they rolled out the red carpet. Everything was above his expectations there relative to the other schools on his list. Now, he will take trips to Oklahoma, LSU, and Tennessee to round out that group before making a verbal commitment in late June. But as things sit right now, I do feel good about Ole Miss's standing. I think it probably comes down to the Rebels and Tennessee, the in-state school, the mustard water bottle school that we're going to be talking about between the Rebels and Tennessee on the recruiting trail. And they're very different systems. So I do think that will be interesting in terms of Bryson's decision-making. But, yeah, just relative to who's got a date planned, I think he's the guy Rebel fans need to keep an eye on. But as you said, offers are going out. Official visits are starting to happen next month in conjunction with camps, and that could lead to big offers or the green light on offers that have already been standing for some Ole Miss prospects. So I do think things will uptick in terms of the verbal commitment front here going forward.
Okay, before I let you out of here, I'm just going to ask this question just to get your opinion on it. What is your favorite Ole Miss Rebels look? Is it the white helmets, the powder blue? What is your favorite Ole Miss Rebels look?
I think the Ole Miss powder blue look is probably a top 5 look of any college program. I was talking to a friend yesterday about something about when you go off script with blue. North Carolina and Ole Miss in particular, when you rock a different shade of blue and it pops, it really does look quite unique. And I like the combination that they showed last year with the powder blue jerseys, white helmets. I think that's a nice look to counter the conventional there. And obviously Lane Kiffin, there's always the possibility for that. So I'll go powder blue, but I think the traditional, Eli Manning navy with the gray stripes, I think that still looks, really good at the end of the day too, from a classic standpoint.
All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen today. Now make your second listen Locked On NBA Big Board podcast with Raphael Barlow, Richard Strayman, Sam Ferris, and Leif Tholen. Give fans an in-depth look at the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and of course, big boards. Follow the Locked On NBA Big Board every day on the Audacity app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. John, thank you so much for stopping by. We'll catch up again right after camp season, probably.
Sounds good, my friend. Good luck with all the house stuff going on.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks, bud.